Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about CO2. So CO2 for me is one of those things where for beginners I don't really recommend it. Maybe for intermediate sort of people who are already into the hobby, I'd lean to maybe doing it. But CO2 is really what feeds the plants and is also very beneficial for plants and fish. People normally use it for plants as it helps grow certain specific plants that look really nice. There's a couple of plants that are like your rotallas. There's a whole different species and of rotalla and various other plants that go from like greenish looking ones to like a very bright, vivid pink and red. So those sort of more exotic looking plants will be probably made through or like being able to grow through primarily using CO2. So there's a couple ways to use CO2. There's injections, and then there's an actual CO2 sort of gas emitter that you can put inside your tank, and you just cycle that on and off. So I guess the benefits, let's go over the benefits. So the benefits for CO2 will be one, your plants will grow a lot more quickly. Two, it helps with your fish and your plants. Both of them will be relatively healthy as long as you don't use too much CO2. And as for negatives or the inverse effects would be, if you don't maintain your tank or prefer not to maintain your tank, doing this would mean your plants would grow relatively quickly, which could mean that you'd have to trim down your plants a lot more often, which for some people that may actually be a benefit because you could grow those trimmings out and start growing more and more plants. And another negative would be you have to monitor your tank more because the CO2 can cause an imbalance. Whereas if there's too much CO2, what could happen is it will change your pH and it'll slowly become more toxic for your fish as CO2 kind of gets rid of the oxygen. And plants produce oxygen for your tank, but if there's too much of it, it will end up sucking up all the oxygen in your tank and will just lead to more toxic and more sick fish, leading to more dead fish, causing a whole explosion in ammonia.
So how do you choose or depict how many plants you should have in a tank?
So personally, you can have as much plants as you can in a tank. Plants help you with the various amount of stuff like getting rid of bad stuff, bad chemicals in your tank. They eat all that and they grow from it. Especially Java moss. Java moss helps your tank a lot. That you can see like
What does Java moss look like?
Java moss is what we have over here. At the moment it's mixed with hair algae, which is why it's in this tank. But at the moment what Java moss does is it grows off by feeding off your ammonium nitrates and nitrites. And it feeds off that, it gets more bigger, and it's very beneficial for your tank. There's another fern here. It's called a Physidens moss, which I've gotten on an actual rock, and you can see it over there. You can also see more hair algae growing on this, which isn't the best, but it happens over time with lighting. As you see, lighting plays a big part with just plants and CO2 in general. Because if you were to have a CO2 tank, what happens over time is you'd have to do a lot more maintenance in algae, as hair algae will become a lot more common, and that hair algae will become more common, and you'll end up not only having to maintain the trimmings of the plant, but having to cut down all the algae if you want to keep it nice and presentable. having other sources of algae eating fish may be able to help you out with this, whether that be a couple ghost shrimps, amano shrimps. Those shrimps tend to be a lot more better than like caradinas and eucaradinas in this, as these guys, although they do scavenge around and eat, they don't go as hungry as like an amano shrimp or ghost shrimp.
So this tank, does it have the oxygen?
No, this tank doesn't have oxygen. It's just very planted with a couple plants I'm growing for another setup I'm going to be doing for more of like a poldarium sort of look. So we have a couple of these very nice looking plants and a floating lace fern along with a bit of duckweed. Duckweed's also very good for getting rid of ammonia and they grow really quickly, as you can see in this tank. It's absolutely covered in this stuff. So what I recommend is CO2 is also a very expensive thing to get into, especially if you're looking for more affordable sort of build for your tank. I wouldn't recommend CO2 for beginners, but it's very useful for the people who are looking for more exotic, more niche plants, for very exotic plants.
So if I was going to do a 4 foot or a 6 foot tank, would that be recommended?
I wouldn't. I say it's personal preference. If you're looking for a 4 foot, 6 foot tank, you can definitely get away with lights and plants. However, if you want it to be, if you're going all out and you have the time to maintain and look after CO2, because looking after CO2 adds a bit of complexity to your tank. It also, and actually another benefit I forgot to add to this was, even though you grow hair algae, more of the algae that grows on the glass doesn't really occur anymore, as the CO2 helps keep that in balance, in return to causing extra plant growth. And for like a 4 foot, 5 foot big tank, you can definitely add a CO2 chamber and get that running. It's just a matter of how interested you are in plants. So I say it's really subjective. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions on CO2, please shoot a message and I'll be able to help you out with that, make a couple of videos on those. And please subscribe and like for more videos.